Hello, and welcome to Kyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign setting. I'm Philip.
I am not supposed to go after Philip. I'm RA.
And I'm Casey. I always go after RA.
There you go.
Works.
And welcome to another Kyber Shards Answers episode, where we take questions from our audience and talk a bit about the world we're playing in and the most recent episodes. And today, a particular NPC, and share some stories about an NPC that has existed in all of my worlds, Levexi. If you would like to submit questions for Kyber Shards, you can do so on our Discord, which you can find a link to in the description below, as well as in the comments to YouTube episodes like this. And you can find in the description also links to all of our various socials at the Geek Pantheon. Okay, so this was an episode idea suggested by RA, but was a really great one because we introduced a character that Casey and RA have experience with, and some of the people on our Discord have experience with, and Colin has some very brief experience with just a couple episodes back when we encountered Levexi, the kobold member of the Rubble Warren gang. So I mentioned this on a previous Kyber Shards Answered, where someone asked if there was some feature in all of my campaigns that remained consistent in all of my worlds. And Levexi is that thing in my worlds. Levexi appeared initially in my home campaign, in our Mummy's Mask campaign that we played over the course of 3 or 4 years, something like that. And initially originated as an NPC in an adventure that I used called Killer Kobolds, which is a fabulous adventure that you can find on the DM's Guild. I highly recommend it. And Levexi appeared as an NPC in that, and just over the course of the adventure was such an irritant to the players that, to my great delight, she survived and began tagging along after the adventurers in an attempt to escape back to civilization with what was left of her kobold tribe. And then she became a fixture because she was greatly amusing to the players, and grew quite a lot over the course of that campaign, through
Not in size.
various what?
Not in size.
No, not in size. No, she remained a small little kobold, but through the various interventions of the player characters in her life. And has now exists in sort of a second life situation in our new campaign that we started back in the winter, I guess, where we've moved the time forward a ways, and Levexi is now sort of a mythic figure among the kobolds of that world, due to her many outstanding accomplishments. So Laura asked a question that seems like a good place to start in the discussion. She had several questions because Laura is one of our patrons who has experienced Levexi, because Laura pledges to our Patreon at the campaign tier, and so I run a monthly campaign for several of our patrons at that tier, and Levexi exists in that world as well. That was Levexi's initial Eberron existence. So Laura asks, Laura asks, how many Levexis are there? And I've been trying to work this out. So there's Levexi Prime, the Levexi of Galarian, our home campaign, set in a highly customized version of the Pathfinder world. There's Levexi from the one shot that I ran for Colin and some other streamers. There's Levexi from the Patreon game. There's Levexi in Kyber Shards. And that may be
What was what I
it.
counted.
There may just be four. I think there are 4 Levexis. I cannot
Assuming-
think of.
Assuming that home game Levexi present is in
Right.
fact Levexi and not some sort of, and not like the inheritor of the title Levexi.
Right. The Levexi.
We haven't met her directly. We have only heard rumor.
Yes. So assuming that to be true, yeah. So there are currently 4 Levexis, across my various fantasy campaigns. The only campaign I run where Levexi does not exist is my One Ring campaign, because there's just not a Levexi in Middle Earth. Like, just Middle Earth Levexi would not make a great deal of sense.
But she would be spectacular nonetheless.
Sure.
She would probably be killed.
Oh,
That's likely, yeah.
very
and then-
resourceful.
And then what always stays the same about her, she's always a bit of a tinkerer, I think, is probably the only really consistent thing. One thing that's the case about Levexi is that every time I've introduced Levexi, she's kind of a blank slate. Like, she's just a kobold, and kobolds are cunning and tinkery. And depending on the interactions between Levexi and the player characters, or various other factors, tend to inform what becomes of Levexi and what she develops into, how much she develops, and all of that. So Levexi Prime became a gunsmith and a gun runner and a black marketeer of some success and a kind of a mob boss, and now possibly a god, sort of.
A hero.
A hero, yes, a mythic hero. And then Levexi in the Patreon game is an alchemist through the interactions with one of the others, and a scavenger. And we haven't really seen enough of Levexi in Kyber Shards to know what Kyber Shards Levexi will become. And then Levexi in the one shot was a stowaway on a train. The thing that is consistent is obviously she's a kobold. She is extremely curious, and she is a bit of a tinkerer. So for knocking off our discussion here, what is, also asked by Laura, what is everyone's most memorable thing she's done? So what are your most memorable Levexi experiences?
I am not great with specific details, but one of my favorite moments with her, and I don't remember who suggested it, but was in our original campaign when we were having a conversation with her, and somehow she figured out that you could sell information for money. She was fairly successful. Fairly successful building her black market empire, but was now opening this entire new avenue of, they don't have to be tangible items.
I think what it was, I've been trying to remember what exactly happened as well, but I think what it was is one of the players was trying to get Levexi to keep a secret, and pointed out that even if someone offered her money, that she should not reveal the information, and that was where it clicked with Levexi that you could sell information, not just stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Ilarion, because I'm pretty sure only Ilarion, or maybe even Jod at that point, which he went through a name change, would have been thinking of that for her. Maybe maybe Tess would as well.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the construction of the guns, because we did destroy a lot of guns, but she still became a very successful gun runner.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the adventure in which Alexi came around, the players, so in the Galarian world, there's a nation city-state called Alkenstar that makes the most sophisticated firearms in the world. Firearms are pretty rare in the base Pathfinder setting, and Alkenstar makes the best ones. They make the ones that are kind of Western action firearms. And someone had stolen some firearms blueprints, and that was part of what the party was checking out. And Levexi had a lever action rifle, which was this very, very new, mysterious invention at the time. And a thing that I have always that's always been true of kobolds when I play them, is that they are good mimics. Like they can imitate very, very well anything they see being done, and they're very good at reverse engineering things that they steal. So they don't have a lot of original ideas, but they can take anything and work out how to do it. And so the Levexi got away with a couple of the guns and began manufacturing them on her own, and eventually murdered the kingpin of the underworld in one of the major cities, which was my version of the Beholder Xanathar.
Yeah.
And
it's like she took over Xanathar's alley, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, and became the ruler of the Undercity, and started and now in our current campaign, there is a Green Dragon Gunworks, which is a major firearms manufacturer and competitor to the Alkenstar Gunworks. So it's one of the two major firearms manufacturing businesses in the world now.
I don't know if I have a favorite specific event. I mean, she arranged to teleport my character back to the main continent after we went through a narrative break, which was, well, both of our characters. We met up on a different continent and ended up contacting Levexi, and through her contacts, she was able to arrange for us to get back secretly, essentially, to the continent that had been taken over by the god king mummy. I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name now.
Hakotep. Yeah.
Hakotep, yeah. So, yeah, we very much needed to get back in a secretive way, and she was able to provide that. But I think my favorite thing about Levexi in that campaign was she was very stereotype breaking. I mean, yes, she still had some of these kobold basic instincts that, she was an underground creature in literal and figurative ways, but she was very clever and interesting and engaging. She started, the way we encountered her was she was a sniper who was tracking us through our trek to get to this workshop where we had business. And she and her group were working for a dragon that had taken up residence or who was also being paid by the person working that workshop. I forget exactly what
her tribe
relationships
had become in the employ of the they thought they were working for a dragon, but it was actually the evil artificer that had taken over that old workshop and built a mechanical dragon.
Okay, so we ended up killing or destroying, I guess, the dragon, at which point the kobolds were like, oh, well, now we're not getting paid, so we give up.
Yeah.
And I get my favorite moment there in total was we sort of negotiated with them. We wanted their guns. If they gave us their guns, they could leave, which they were really loath to do. They didn't want to do that. But we ended up having this conversation and kind of trying to figure out, well, how long do kobolds live, Levexi? And it was that first moment of like of this. We ask a question, and she thinks about the question that she's never had before, and it sort of changes things. Where she basically pointed out to us that she didn't know how long kobolds live because natural death is not a kobold norm. Because they have short lifespans because they're constantly dying as minions to more powerful creatures. And so this was like the start. That moment was like the start of her empire of like, oh, wait, we could do stuff in order to keep us alive longer. that was the genesis. And they ended up because we showed some mercy and some initiative towards them. They ended up following us back to the city, and because of that, we ended up hiring them. Just paying them to do some stuff we needed done, and through various ways. I know Alarian. So Alarian was the monk I was playing. He offered, because of that conversation about living and noticing that, okay, she might actually want to do more than just die in someone else's service. He offered to get her monk training. Like, do you want out of this life in total? She wasn't interested in that, but basically we sort of adopted her as like, well, if you're interested in not killing us, we could use you in ways that we don't want you to die either. We don't have any, so we could make this work. Maybe we unleashed a monster upon the world, but
no, a blessing. She became one of our biggest and most significant allies. I mean, that's how we were able to get into and out of the city once our characters returned to the continent. She was the one that had the underground system to move us around without being found out. And then the resources to help us end up winning.
Yeah. Well, and it was kind of a trope that every time you met Levexi, there were more kobolds with her. That they seem to just multiply real fast, which I assume that for kobolds not to go extinct, they must have a really, really rapid generation rate. I like trying to figure out, and it's probably why I like Eberron a lot, because Eberron does this with most of the traditional races. I like trying to figure out, okay, sure, kobolds are this classic thing that we throw against first level adventurers because they have practically no hit points, low AC, and they can just be cannon fodder. But why? Why are kobolds like that? And so you have a very, very prolific race, a reasonably cunning race, because they're always presented as tricky, which is what that adventure does so well, because the kobolds are just maddeningly difficult, even though they're not high CR in that adventure. So you have a fairly clever species that's really prolific, and yet always ends up dominated by some more powerful being, which I basically tend to think of kobolds as humanoid remoras.
Don't know that reference.
It's the little fish that go along in the wake of a shark.
Oh.
Yeah. They're protected by whatever big powerful being they're is ruling them. In exchange they are minions for them and usually pick up some things. So, you always end up with a couple of kobolds in the mix that are sorcerers because they've been hanging around this dragon long enough that they've picked up some magic, that sort of thing. And it was not at all an intentional thing that Levexi would become this character. It was entirely through PC agency that she became important. But I really like the idea of, okay, what happens if a kobold works out how to be her own boss, like how to not be the minion of something. And yeah, like you say, maybe you unleashed a horrible danger onto the world.
At the time, the horrible dangers in the world were far, far worse than
Oh yeah.
someone who is not trying to burn everything down. Because even if
Yeah.
she's very dangerous, she's not trying to destroy everything. It's a self-interested dangerous, not a dominate the world dangerous. So we were okay with it at the time.
Yeah.
But even in that, she was actively helping
Yeah.
the victims of the big bad. The reason we were able to get back to the continent was because she had an entire smuggling system getting people to safe places, and we were just the idiots that wanted to go back to the dangerous place.
Yeah. So I guess a little context is useful here. In that campaign, the player characters lost the second to climactic battle of the campaign. Like, the party was defeated and some of the party were killed, and the others escaped with their lives. But the party was thoroughly defeated. The party failed to stop the super important ritual to prevent the bad guy from achieving his long-term goal. And so
And then we broke up.
we,
The
and then
survivors.
everybody just fled.
fled.
Yeah. And so we took a break and we jumped forward and we played kind of an Age of Apocalypse campaign where the player characters, some new and some survivors, were trying to become some were kind of part of a resistance, and all of them were trying to overthrow the God King Hakatep. And it became this whole new chapter of the campaign, which was really awesome. But yeah, Levexi was a huge important aspect of that. And then the other interesting thing with Levexi is Levexi and her group escaped with an egg from one of the dragons that had once ruled over them, which eventually hatched. And so now you have this delightful reversal where Levexi is the maternal figure. Levexi has a dragon that has imprinted onto her at birth. And so is the maternal figure to this little green dragon. That,
Little.
Right.
well, I mean, at the time you guys
at a
encountered
time,
it as I guess wormling is the D&D term for its size. And even 50, 60 years on in our new campaign, it would still be quite young as a dragon. So, yeah.
But young and small are not smallness.
No, that's true. Yeah, young dragons are not necessarily small.
So I do think, as you mentioned, how you approached Levexi as sort of a blank slate. I actually think it's something I've taken from you, and I think it's a great approach for NPCs in general to present the NPC in a very basic way. You know, give them a base level personality, and then for most of the other aspects of that character to come from how your PCs are reacting to them. How are they interpreting this little slice you've given them? Like you give them a slice. What did they see as the pie from that? Or maybe you give them a piece that what is the whole puzzle? And then to just adjust your NPC based on that. And I think that's true for environments largely as well. Especially if you don't have like a map to show, if it's not super predefined, and I think it's most of the time good to not super predefine it. It's very effective to simply adjust how things are in the world to how the players are already interpreting it and what characteristics they're providing to it. So I think that's just a lovely thing about Levexi as object study.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like molding a scene or an environment or a whole world to a party's to a player's needs. I mean, easy example. Casey has been trying to work out some of the details of Shade's background before the program, and she's had lots of questions about various aspects of Eberron, and they're well outside of the likely scope of this campaign. And so, since they aren't things that I've had any reason to predefine for the purposes of what I have planned out, the little piece of the campaign that I have sketched out, I'm entirely happy for her to define those things as best fits her character backstory. And Eric has done a lot of defining what Korrivar culture is like. That's not mine. Korrivar as sort of Eberron Roma isn't in the books, and it's not mine. It's Eric's in Eric's head, and being a Kalashtar isn't a super vital part of Esri right now. But if it started to become more important, I would want to work with RA on what Kalashtar customs are and what Kalashtar culture is like, because when players get to define stuff, I mean, Lexi is a wonderful example of this. When players get to impact and shape the world, they're going to be more interested in stuff. I think that's a lot of the reason that Levexi is so well liked in every campaign that I've used her in, aside from the ridiculous voice. I mean, the ridiculous voice is charming, and I think that's a big selling point. That she talks like this, and so the ridiculous voice is definitely a big selling point. But beyond that, beyond her just being funny, I think what makes her charming is that she is so, narratively speaking, moldable. To a large degree, as a person, she is quite moldable, but specifically as a plot point, she is very moldable to the players and to the characters.
She's also a monkey paw character. I just sort of realized that. It's like every time she helps you, she's like, "Oh, you can help me get a gun?" Yes. What is it?
Yeah, yes, very much so. Anytime you get Levexi to do something for you, she is going to have her own way of interpreting what you want. And always in a very self-interested way, because that has become her, at least with Levexi Prime, that became her thing. Was, I'm not going to let big scary things kill me, and I'm not going to let big scary things kill kobolds. And I think that's one of the interesting things that's happening in our new campaign, as you guys are starting to interact with kobolds who have been influenced by Levexi, is it's not as easy to talk them into doing what you want as it has been, because they have been culturally influenced by Levexi's worldview, and so have greater expectations of the way the world should treat them than kobolds might have in the past.
It's been fun. I mean, having to be more convincing and them having, self-interest
Mhm.
and
So that
skills to share. I mean, they're not just minions.
so that's like just a wild thing about RPGs in general. We made essentially a mechanical choice, a mechanical optimization in a fight to. Well, I don't even know if it was an optimization. Technically, it was anti-optimization. We didn't take out the trash. We didn't go just murder the kobolds before taking out the dragon. We focused on the dragon, and actually we didn't even kill the dragon at that point. I think we hurt it enough for it to run away.
Yeah.
But by doing that, Levexi, like the kobolds, survived, and that was purely mechanical.
Mhm.
But because they survived and we killed their leader, well, then they didn't fight, and then we had this whole interaction, and it touched off a cultural revolution for an entire race in our world. Which that's something that you're not gonna get in something that's not freeform like this. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, mechanically speaking, when I need stat blocks for them in the future, kobolds just universally have a higher intelligence in our world now, because
That's awesome.
they have the means to receive knowledge in ways other than through serving a master. And I mean, they're still kobolds. They're not, the kobolds you guys have been interacting with live in the root system of a big hollow tree. They're like Keebler elves or something. They're not. There's not likely to
very
be
literal.
a big kobold empire developing in the classical sense of giant cities and that sort of thing. But so there's fundamental things about them that are still just kobold, because that's what's fun about kobolds, is that they are a little bit goofy. But I really like seeing, and I guess what's funny is aside from the really big thing where there was a war among among various powerful beings for control of death that had a massive impact on the world. Other than the fact that this is a world now that has survived a zombie apocalypse, this is probably the biggest way in which the world is different because of that campaign, is because you guys didn't slaughter the kobolds.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of those things was like campaign narrative, core to the campaign, and the other was just like potentially a throwaway interaction.
Yeah. I mean, you expect being defeated by the big bad. Of course, that's going to shift the world around you, but just deciding, we need to preserve our resources for fighting the dragon and not deal with this right now. That decision had huge consequences. But I mean, to a degree, that decision, but I think bigger is the way that you dealt with the kobolds when you came back out. I mean, yes, the decision not to kill them, but also the decision to actually engage with them was also very, I think, important to it. So, yeah. Anyway, we had a couple of other questions. One, Laura asks, is the loot still alive? I mean, the loot was never alive. It's certainly terribly damaged since she's been wielding it as a weapon. It is probably still in loot shape, but it's not going to be a very useful musical instrument anytime soon.
It's wood now.
Yeah, it's a club. It's an oddly.
It's reverted to its previous life.
Yeah, it's a suboptimally shaped club. And then Laura asks, can we have a special spin-off episode in which all the Levexis join up and go on an adventure together?
I mean,
I would watch that.
Levexi Prime is not the same level.
Yeah, Levexi Prime is very... It would almost like... Levexi Prime would need to summon the other Levexis and send them on an adventure.
swoop in on her dragon.
Yeah. No, I think an all kobold adventuring party would be really fun for a short term, I think, campaign. I think it would stop being about kobolds after a while because you just probably couldn't keep up that bit for very long. But I think a short run adventure that is an all kobold party would be just absolutely bonkers fun.
Absolutely.
I try not to name drop here, but to that point, I mean, yes, maybe we can do that sometime.
Sure.
Critical Role, which you may have heard of, did a one shot sponsored by World of Warcraft. I think it was World of Warcraft, or
Oh,
it was
yes,
a different game.
Yeah,
I think
it was a World of Warcraft spin-off game.
And it was, I'm looking for the name of it. I don't recall. Oh no, Hearthstone. Hearthstone. That was Kobold themed because they released a Kobold expansion. And it's fantastic. It's a one shot. It's look up their Hearthstone one shot. It has some of my absolute favorite like voice actor character moments in it because they're all kobolds and they're all very classical kobolds. They consider themselves expendable, and they have very little consideration for the idea of anyone's safety. It really is a lot of fun.
Well, and one of Pathfinder's enduring and highly popular free RPG Day event is always a sequel to We Be Goblins, which was a free RPG Day adventure they released years and years ago, and now there have been, I don't know, 6 or 8 iterations of it, where everyone plays goblins, and it's just you go and do goblin things, and goblins in Pathfinder are like just crazy chaotic. Like they are just intensely chaotic. They're decidedly evil, but also just goofy as all get out. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of fun to be had in playing monsters, and particularly monsters that might possibly be in any way sympathetic.
You said that, and now I remember. I'm actually they did exactly what I'm saying, but they also did that exact thing. They
ran
like
that game. I think they ran one of those adventures.
Yes, it was separate, but they also ran with the goblins.
Yeah,
that was really good too.
Yeah. All right, so we have a couple of non-Levexi related questions as well. One from Eric. What are Shade's thoughts about the Rebel Warren gang? Who is her favorite? And which mask does she want to wear? I would like to hear this from Esri's perspective too, because I think those are going to be very different perspectives on the nature of the Rebel Warren gang. Although maybe the same answer, but
when is this going out?
This will be going out. Let's see.
It matters.
Yeah, no. This will go out after it will be after the first episode we recorded last night, so it will be. But I think not.
Okay, that's fine. After the first,
this will go out. I think this will go out after the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, we just recorded last night, so we're trying to make sure we don't spoil things.
I mean, Shade's favorite is Ilya. She stated that as soon as she met them, and even continued experience with them has proven that to be true. Her thoughts on the Rebel Warren gang are complicated. She has a little bit of jealousy. She did not have a childhood in the way that they are getting to meet up with friends and play games, and they're choosing these dangerous situations, but they also have, from what we've seen, most of them seem to have families that care about them. And so this idea that there's a group of friends that get to hang out and go on adventures is a little bit painful for her, because that was not her experience. She is happy for them, but she's a little bit jealous and sad about it. what she lost. But Casey, the player, thinks they're awesome. Shade thinks they're a little irresponsible. they are purposefully putting themselves in danger, and that is not Shade's philosophy on life.
That would be a one shot. You play the Rebel Warren gang and you go on the chicken heist.
That'd be pretty good.
That would be so much fun.
That'd be a good comment goal.
Mm-hmm. What's
Break episode.
what's Shade's?
That would be awesome.
Which mask does Shade want?
Oh, hands down, the one that she respects the most is Levexi's. All of the other ones are handmade masks, but Levexi's is an actual skull. And so the assumption is that you killed this monster and are wearing this trophy. That's way more intimidating than a handmade mask.
Ezri's perspective, well, I guess it's also complicated, but in a different way. I mean, he thinks they're idiots.
Sure.
But that's more of an objective note. Like, they're idiots. Although he does have some respect for Ilya. She didn't sell her mask, and she's obviously a competent fighter for her age, especially. And she just seems a little less childish than the rest are. He doesn't know what that's about, if it's about anything, but like what doesn't really seem like she belongs with them quite as much. Like she may be taking this thing that they're not taking so seriously, really seriously. But he does have some respect for her. The only one he actually cares about is Donabella, and that's for very specific reasons. I mean, he hasn't said it this boldly yet in the show, but essentially he considers them the same species, even though they're all different. All of us are different species. The whole aberrant dragon mark thing is like really a step above that. Like, so considers them the same kind of people. What he really thinks about them, though, and this is just because of who he is and the way his mind works, he automatically thinks of them as a potentially very valuable resource. He knows immediately that kids can be invisible to powerful people, and especially kids who are willing to put themselves into dangerous situations and are resourceful enough to get out of those situations. Potentially very, very useful in the irregulars sense.
Yeah.
Now, I will admit, I don't think he's considered this yet. It's a very hypocritical thing. But in the same way that cycles of abuse go, he sees them as a potential. I mean, again, he wouldn't say this to himself, and he definitely doesn't think of himself as putting them in deliberate danger, but they're to be used in that sense. Like, they can be manipulated, and they can do things that he can't do because they can be anonymous, more or less.
Yeah.
His favorite mask is Ilya's. I don't actually even remember what it was, but it's because she didn't sell it, and it means something more to her. Again, there is, of all of them that he would like be willing to go into the jungle with, it's pretty much only her.
Yeah.
Actually, she might help him survive.
The others are much more a liability. They are inexperienced, understandably, but inexperienced and short-sighted and impulsive. Shade struggles with none of those things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, mechanically speaking, and I think this comes across, in terms of a stat card that I would use for them. Obviously, Levexia is just Kobold as her stat card. Most of the kids are, I guess not most. Bajak is a commoner. Donabella would also be a commoner with a little bit of an aberrant mark, attached. But Kadric and Ilya would actually have a class level, like an NPC class level or something like that. Kadric has probably got a warrior class level, and Ilya's probably got an expert class level because she's got a little more of the roguey rangery thing going on with her. Yes. And we certainly see, because she's got an actual weapon, Ilya come across more effective in a fight than any of the others. Definitely. And then we had one question from Caleb Earl. This was a question submitted as a comment on one of our YouTube videos a couple of weeks back.
You can do that?
You can put your questions in the comments on this very video, and as soon as I see them, I will include them in our list. Does Philip or do the players know in advance what their marks will do when they grow, or is it an at-the-moment decision? So there's two ways to approach this question. One is in the moment, like literally in the moment that the mark grows, what will it do? And that has been, I make that up in the moment according to what I think the narrative will make interesting. So
much fun.
Casey's lightning bolt, RA's with Ezri getting to talk to the dead thing, accidentally waking it up slightly, and then Ari's telekinetic strength check. Those were just all moments in the narrative where it made sense, immense moments of great stress, moments where you're trying to do something and suddenly something unexpected happens. And those I just sort of make up what should happen then. But mechanically, what it is I've created a set of rules using a feat from one of the resources I've talked about, Chronicles of Kyber's Cursed. That's the Child of Kyber feat. And so that gave the players each their initial power. But in addition to that, whenever their marks grow, the players get to choose a new spell. And that's their choice. The players get to choose a new spell that is attached to their mark. And then I also created some minor effects that are based on old edition Dragon Mark feats that I'm referring to as evolutions. And the players get to choose one of those as well. Unfortunately, because I've in many cases just adapted these from old published materials, I can't post those, or I would. But they are largely based on feats out of the Dragon Marked book from 3rd edition, and give the players a little bit of extra effect to their mark to play up the importance of the mark even when they're not casting the spell from it. Because it's very easy for the mark to sort of fade into the background if you only get to use it once or twice a day to cast a spell. And so giving some extra effects, most of which cost hit dice, is a nice, I think, little boost to the mark, and plays up the sort of the superhero angle that we're kind of going for.
From my perspective as a player, I have grown an aversion to planning a character very much these days, and so I have no intentions or plans for the mark. I didn't even look at what it could do when it grew until that happened, because Esri doesn't know, and I don't know who Esri's going to be when it happens. So I think I'm going to try to let the narrative drive that entirely.
Yeah, I do want to say the amount of things where I've been having conversations with the players and they're like, I'm really cool with you just deciding this, is really both flattering as a GM, but also deeply intimidating in a lot of ways. Like we saw when we did the video where Colin chose his subclass, that he just sort of like, hey, this is the subclass I'm picking. What that means, you come up with. Eric has been that way with several things about his character, and RA and Casey both have as well. And so it has gone both directions, where I've given the players a lot of freedom in picking things, and they in turn have given me a lot of freedom to mess with their characters in terms of what the things that their characters don't know. And it's fun. It is intimidating because I feel the weight of, I really want this to be pleasing and satisfying to the player, which is why I'm very happy with how Cal has turned out in terms of that being something that Casey likes. But yeah, so it's a little of both. A little bit the players have some choice, a little bit the players are surprised. And they don't have any idea when it's going to happen. I don't have any idea when it's going to happen. There's usually a moment where I'm like, oh, this is just too good, so go. And so we just haven't gotten there with Pog yet. I almost did it with Pog in the Otyugh fight when he went down, but we had just had it happen with Shade, and I didn't want to take any weight away from it happening with Shade by having it happen with Pog immediately.
The surprise that was going on when Esri was talking to the dead Vadalist guy was very, very genuine, because I knew that I had no way to do this.
Yeah,
this shouldn't be happening. So okay, sure.
Well, and that's also been a fun thing with the player secrets that the players have chosen, is in most cases the players have sort of turned down opportunities to really specifically plan out what their secret's resolution is. Probably the one I've talked the most with is Casey, and that's just because there are several things that need to be established about that. But to a degree, RA and Colin both kind of didn't exactly settle real firmly on one of the big secrets, and so allowed me to have a lot of control in defining that. Eric has been very hands-off, having picked his and then just sort of said, and whatever you want to do. And I have enjoyed tormenting him with it in little ways that I think most people aren't catching. But it is fun that Eric is noticing, and that's amusing.
Now I'm so curious.
So
if you have theories,
right.
leave them in the comments.
Yes, if you have guesses as to what the players' secrets are, because there have now been distinct hints to every player's secret. At least once, and in most cases multiple times, I think.
That's interesting. I'm not even aware of that for myself.
Yeah, you don't actually know your secret, which is very fun.
There's a good bit Esri doesn't know about himself. So
yeah, and Colin doesn't exactly either. So let us know what your theories are in comments, and tell us if you have in your home games something that reappears over and over again throughout the campaigns, and what your favorite running gag or running bit is in your campaign. As always, we appreciate a like and a subscribe. We hope you have enjoyed this little look into our home gaming. We'll probably do another episode like this. I think it would be fun, because I've talked about on the Knowledge Check, and I've talked about on the blog on our old website, what happened when the party lost. But I think it would be fun to sit down with people who were actually playing that and talk a little bit more about our home games. So we may do another one of these that revisits our old campaign and talk about the fall of the party and some of the other big interesting moments just from a player perspective. So I think that's interesting.
Never died.
That's true. Successfully
So
made
many
it the whole
times.
time. That's also true.
And not just that. Like, that was a split campaign, right? We started in Pathfinder. Well, I kept Alarian from Pathfinder, so like you died. Your characters died in front of Alarian like over and over.
So many times.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, Ari's character survived the whole thing without even having to be resurrected or brought back in any way. Oh. All right. Well,
Just play impulsive
anyway.
fun characters.
Right. Anyway, we hope you've enjoyed this look back. This has been Kyber Shards. I'm Philip.
I'm RA.
And I'm Casey.
Thanks for rolling with us.